All right. So it was about Tuesday morning that I realized I bit off a little bit more I can chew on this sermon. Because today we're talking about the 6 days of creation. And Tuesday morning, I thought, man, I think I made a mistake. And so I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions, deal with all the other issues. But I am going to try to address some of the big questions that people have about the 6 days. And my hope is that you'll walk away from this message with a stronger faith and trust that the Bible is true, and especially that the creation story is very believable. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm headed with this. So let's just dive in, start with verse 2, and this is what it says. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now this is actually before the 6 days, but in this verse, God created all the basic stuff that our world is made of. And it is noteworthy that water is, in fact, one of the basic elements for the existence of any kind of life. But it says God's Spirit just like hovering over this. It's like this mass lump of energy and clay, and God's hands are just hovering around it, ready to mold it into something, to stamp some kind of design and create it into something that would support life on the planet as we now know it. And so that's kind of what that's about. And the rest of the chapter then, the 6 days, gives us an idea of the actual form and design that God impressed upon this matter that he created to begin with in this raw material. And he did it in 6 days. Today we're going to talk about these 6 days. So the 6 days have sparked a lot of debate because the accepted, as you know, scientific view is that the world and all its life forms have evolved over millions and millions of years, not just 6 days. And in fact, it's promoted as an unquestionable fact, right? I mean, it's like you're kind of looked at and persecuted if you question this whole evolutionary model. When the truth is, the evolutionary theory is not even a great theory, okay? And this is what I've tried to explain to you. The good news is in the last 3-4 decades, maybe longer, open-minded scientists, non-Christian scientists, have begun to see major flaws in the theory of evolution. Books are written on this stuff, non-Christians. That's why they're looking at alien life forms and all sorts. They're trying to look at other solutions because evolution doesn't cut it. And what these non-Christian scientists are open to, they've begun to see that there's obvious, unquestionable evidence in the universe of what we call intelligent design. How many have heard of intelligent design? Okay, and it's there, and these things defy any idea that the world was created in some kind of linear evolutionary development thing. And so today I want you to be a little more confident in the biblical view that, and question maybe this idea, the ideology of evolution that we're systematically indoctrinated with. So let me start with a short video that kind of gives you an eye-opening explanation of how we were intelligently designed.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. if the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or, another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence suggests that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
Pretty impressive, huh? It's kind of like it's dumbfounding when you look at the numbers. And so you have these top-level scientists, non-Christians, accepting the fact that this thing's designed. So the next intelligent question is, who's the designer? Okay, so, I think we can answer that pretty easy. So let's go on and look at the 6 days of creation in chapter 1. I don't want to read the whole chapter. I mean, you can do that. In fact, be sure to do that on your own. Let me just give you an overview of the whole chapter and the creation story. So in verses 3 through 5, God created light, and there was evening and morning the first day. Verses 6 through 8, God created the sky and our atmosphere, second day. In verses 9 through 13, God created the land masses, and that probably involved, the land coming up and the tectonic plates dividing, all that kind of stuff. And so that was the land on day 3. Verses 14 through 19, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars. Okay, so that's the 4th day. Verses 20 through 23, the birds and the sea creatures. And that's the 5th day. And finally, on verses 24 through 31, God created all the land animals and mankind, and that was the 6th day. So the first really big question that we have to ask, did God really create the world in 6 days? Okay, and this is actually 2 questions. And the 2 questions are this: could God create it in 6 days? And did he create it in 6 days? You see the difference? So let's just start with the question, could God create the universe in 6 days? Well, if he's God, and he's outside space and time, and he has infinite power, infinite wisdom, he can pretty much do whatever he wants. Does that make sense? In fact, the real question is, why did it take him so long? You understand? If that's the God, why did it take him 6 days? Well, I mean, he might have been done by 9 o'clock or, 6 o'clock, and what do you do the rest of the day? It's like he could just, man. And so, I don't know if we have to ask, question that. Of course he could. He could do it in a heartbeat. In fact, let's allow ourselves to be impressed with God a little bit. You ready? Because some people question the creation account because of the 6-day thing, but these are the kinds of questions we come up with. They ask questions about the stars. Science tells us that the stars are out there billions of light years away, and that, light travels 186,000 miles per second. Billions of light years. That's a long ways away. And so the question is, did God just create the stars with the light already here? Well, if he's outside of space and time, he could have. Okay, but think about this. If God used Big Bang, okay, so let's say God did make Big Bang go bang, all right, and he started all at one place with this matter and stretched it out through the universe, all those stars that are billions of light years away were at one time in our backyard, and the light was already here, and that when the stars went out, they just trailed their light behind them. But here's the thing that blows our minds. God could have done that in a matter of 1 of our seconds, which is unimaginably faster than the speed of light. Speed of light is finite. God is greater than that. And here's the thing we need to remember about God, that he's everywhere, all at once, all the time, so that he's here and he's out there. God does not have to travel. You realize that? He's just everywhere, and, it just blows my mind when I think about that. So, could he? Yeah. I mean, it's not a real issue. And so he's fully capable of creating the universe in 6 days. But the question is, did he? And so if we stick to a literal interpretation of the creation story, that would make our earth much younger than science says. And it could be as young as 10,000, 15,000 years. And there's actually evidence that supports this. To begin with, there's some problems with the scientific dating methods. And I can't get into all this. There's just not time. But they use carbon dating, and I'm sure they get into this in the Creation Museum, right, Anita? And there's just problems with it because the carbon dating is based on assumptions that cannot be proved scientifically, at least sufficiently. I mean, to prove carbon dating without question, you'd need an extra few million years of experimentation. And then maybe, you could say it's valid, but, it's just such iffy. And so it's just not there. And so that's true. That said, there are many Christians who trust carbon dating. And this is what I just want to say, that's okay. Okay? If the carbon dating's true, that would make our Earth much, much older. And that's okay. And so what they do is they propose that the 6 days are not literal 6 days, that they're figurative. And that's okay. There's Christians that believe that. That's just kind of where they're at. There's nothing in the Bible that requires us to believe in the literal 6 days. I'll talk about the 6 days because I lean that way. But let me just say, if that's kind of where you want to go, it's not going to send you to hell. It's not going to compromise your relationship with Jesus. It's not going to keep you from growing in Jesus. If that's where you're at, that's fine. If that's where your faith is at, that's fine. But other Christians are very comfortable with a simple, straightforward 6-day young earth creation story. And when I looked at the evidence, I kind of lean that way. That's kind of where I'm at. And by the way, there's also variations on those theories between those two. So I'm just, it's there. And so the point is that God did the creating, and he did it either figuratively or literally in 6 days. And so at least you got to have that. And let me also say that we do the creation service a disservice when we try to make it into a scientific treatise. Because the ancient peoples didn't have science the way we have science. They didn't think that way. And what we have in the creation story is really a story meant to be a literary, even poetic depiction of how creation came about. And this especially makes sense when we look at how days 1, 2, and 3 parallel days 3, 4, and 6. And it's like days 1, 2, and 3, God created the environment or the infrastructure. And in days 4, 5, and 6, God created the objects and things that went into the infrastructure. That kind of makes sense to me. And that's what we have. It's kind of a human level. Oh, yeah, I can kind of see that works. And there's more questions, but that works for me. And so let me go on and share with you some more information, though, that supports a literal 6-day interpretation and makes our earth relatively young. Let's go to the second day of creation. In verses 6 and 7, it says, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. And God called the expanse sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day." Now, this is kind of an odd verse when you say, this doesn't make sense to me. But it paints a picture where an expanse called the sky is separating water below and water above. What the heck is that? And so this suggests at some point in time there was a vast layer of water in some form above our atmosphere surrounding the earth. This is called the canopy theory. How many of you have heard of the canopy theory? Okay. And it's the idea that at one time there was this water canopy completely surrounding the earth. And if such a water canopy surrounded the earth, it would create some conditions that support not only the rest of the creation story, but a young earth. And this is why. First off, a water canopy would create a greenhouse effect, making the whole earth into one ginormous garden. Does that sound familiar? Okay. I mean, and check out Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. It says, no shrub of the field was yet on the earth, no plant of the field had been sprouted. For the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. But a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. If there was a canopy and there wasn't any rain, that's what that would look like. You can imagine it, right? So at one point there was no rain, mist rising from the ground. Secondly, this water canopy would protect all life forms from harmful UV rays from the sun, thus allowing all life forms to grow and live for very long periods of time. Okay? In Genesis chapter 5, verses 4 through 5, it says, the days of Adam after he became the father of Seth were 800 years. And he had other sons and daughters, and All the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. A lot of people go, what? How can that be? Well, if there was a water canopy, that's very possible. And Adam lived 930 years. His son Seth lived 912 years. Seth's son Enosh lived 905 years. And it goes on. Methuselah, how many have heard of Methuselah? 969 years, the oldest person. That's where we get the saying, as old as Methuselah. It's right there. Now, something else to consider is this. In our world, reptiles never cease growing until they die. Okay? So, if you got a reptile living 900 years or plus, how big are they going to get? Does that kind of connect some dots for you? Does that make some explanations for you? And see, that's just another way of looking at it. I'm not saying it's the way it is. It's one of the theories that kind of makes sense. And dinosaurs really are another question people raise in regard to the creation account, because they supposedly existed and became extinct millions of years before humans showed up on the picture. Well, to begin with, the dinosaurs themselves were also completely, intelligently, complexly designed. And in fossil evidence, they have no ancestors. There's no transition evidence in the fossil record. They seem to show up spontaneously and came into existence on the earth, just like they're kind of placed here. Okay? There's that. But they also might not be that old. And Anita already kind of hinted at this. Did you know that dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible? You can find them in the book of Job, you can find them in the book of Isaiah, and you can find them in the book of Psalms. And they're descriptive. It's like, wow, it's just there. Okay? And this is where it gets even more interesting. We're going to jump forward to the story of the great flood in Genesis 6. Actually 7. In chapter 7, it says, "For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all of the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered, and the waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet." Another question people have is, how could there have possibly been that much water to create that kind of flood? Because right now, the way the world looks, there isn't that much water that could do that. But if there was a great canopy and some cataclysmic force dropped that thing on us, you kind of see how that could happen. Okay? But check this out. This all makes sense. The vast fossil record indicates that dinosaurs could have then gone extinct due to this massive catastrophe like Noah's Ark, because they were buried quickly and furiously. Some have been found in intact, pristine, mummified conditions. It happened like this, okay? Like the mummies, or not mammoths that they find. They just happened instantaneously. Furthermore, some of these fossils have at least 14 fresh biomaterials in their bones, still in their bones, that could not have survived a million years, let alone millions of years. That's just what the findings are. These dinosaurs were buried simultaneously with other dinosaurs fleeing in groups. That's what the evidence says. They're frequently found mixed together with marine fossils, and oftentimes in the mountain regions. How many of you found marine fossils in the mountains? It's like, it's there, it's a fact. Explain that. Supposedly, elephants evolved millions of years after dinosaurs had already become extinct. However, fossilized elephant and dinosaur tracks have been discovered in the same rock stratum. In fact, I'll go on. Evolutionists allege that the tiny marine organisms known as trilobites perished from the earth 500 million years before humans arrived, yet fossilized trilobites have been found embedded in human sandal prints. In fact, human footprints have been found inside of dinosaur tracks. Okay, you see where I'm getting at? So maybe we're not really sure how old things are. They could be a lot younger. And there's even more implications to the water canopy theory. Geologists tell us that geological formations we see throughout the earth took millions upon millions of years to form, like the Grand Canyon. They say that was millions of years. But it's been demonstrated scientifically that if something like the flood occurred on the face of the planet, those same formations could have been created within a matter of days. And when Mount St. Helens blew, we got the picture, it just happened in days. The same kinds of thing. Only on that small scale, just think a big scale. And, you know, I couldn't show you all the pictures, okay? And so the Toutle River Basin, you just go there, you can see. Furthermore, geologists have always, been dating things by various strata of rock, and they got to figure out this strata of rock was, in the Paleolithic period, and it's, 100 million, and this is a million. And of course, the lower the strata of rock, layer of rock, it's the older. And so the oldest ones are millions upon millions. Okay, so what do you do when you find a vertically standing fossilized tree, some 20 to 30 feet high, that's 2 or 3 stories, protruding up through several rock strata, okay, supposedly formed over 1 million years? Obviously, what happened was layer upon layer of silt came down on that tree before it even had a chance to decompose and crumble. I mean, you can't have both. Does that make sense to you? And that's what we have. And here's another thing to consider. As we look at the Bible record, just after the flood, okay, without the water canopy blocking out the harmful rays of the sun, people immediately begin to live less long. It just drops off, and it just immediately drops down to the kind of lifespan we have today. It just kind of like, all right, see how all these pieces fit together? And let me close by just looking at the animal kingdom. I just wish there's just so much I could give you. And the animals were created on the 5th and 6th days, the sea creatures. And verse 20, and God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth and across the expanse. Verse 24, and God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. And so evolutionists again tell us that all life forms evolved over millions of years. But the fossil evidence tells us that there is no gradual increase of life over millions of years. Instead, there seems to be an explosion of life. All life forms just seem to show up in the fossil record. That's just how it is. And you don't hear about this stuff. And even more than that, as we look at all the various species of animals, we begin to wonder how evolution could be possible. Did they really develop by evolutionary means? Most of these animals' biological designs are so incredibly complex, they defy an evolutionary explanation. Take a look. Did these scary and intimidating creatures just evolve? Isn't that weird? Okay. Did these amazingly beautiful and unique creatures just evolve? Really? Okay. Did these animals with their unusual design and patterns just evolve? That bottom one is a bombardier beetle. It blasts an explosion thing out its rear end. And I got to tell you, it baffles evolution because the design of that beetle, how does it keep itself from blowing up? It's created that way. I mean, there's systems within systems. It couldn't have evolved. It had to just been put together as a package. And we could talk about the giraffe and woodpeckers. How do woodpeckers peck on a tree without blasting their brains out? It's design. And it could not have evolved. It just had to be made that way. It's as simple as that. Okay? And then did these odd and bizarre creatures just evolve? And then the final one. I'm sure glad I didn't get to that bottom one. That's just like, wow. It's amazing, isn't it? And you just have to ask yourself, really? How do all these amazing animal videos, I just read videos, animal creatures come into being? And evolution says that simpler life forms evolved into greater life forms, and it just didn't happen. And by the way, go home and look up the video Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution by David Hames and Joby Martin, and you'll get a lot of these. But here's the deal. We've been indoctrinated and brainwashed into thinking evolution is an unquestionable fact when it's just not. And I went online to see if anything new was on this topic. And I looked on and I saw this headline caught me, is evolution a fact? And so I clicked it, and this is what the internet told me. Evolution is both fact and theory. Evolution is widely observable in the laboratory and natural populations as they change over time. The fact that we need an annual flu vaccine is one example of observable evolution. He lost me at flu vaccine. I don't know about you, but anyhow, this is what we hear all the time, but it's just blatantly untrue. It's a grievous example of misinformation. It's a deception, and here's what you need to understand so you're not fooled by this kind of quotation, is that adaptation of a species is not the same as evolution of species from one species to another. Adaptation is no big deal. We can see adaptation in creatures and species, they change, but what we don't see is one species evolving into another species. There's just no evidence of it. It's a humongous leap that cannot happen. And it doesn't happen. There's no evidence of it happening. They say that the simpler organisms gave birth to higher complex organisms. And it's not possible. And what's even more interesting is the simple life forms are just as complex. They're not simple. What do I have here? Yeah, a fern has 500 chromosomes in the nucleus of each of its cells. A crayfish has 200, while humans only have 46. They're more complex. Evolution is not, never has been, never can be an observable fact, and that is a fact. And the material I'm sharing with you today just scratches the surface. And I'm sorry I'm going long, but it's good material, right? On the sixth and last day of creation, God created man in his own image, and he created them male and female. Okay? This passage here is going to get its own message, okay, because this is too big. So come back for this one. And today I just want you to understand that we have been and are being told a story about our world and our human lives that's a lie. Okay? And if we accept it, it ends up devaluing us and dehumanizing us. And that's why we see the devaluing and dehumanizing of people, because if all we are is what evolution tells us, there's no value. Okay? The truth is, you and I are a creation of God. Man, that makes you extremely special and valuable and loved by God. And God sent his son Jesus to die on the cross to reclaim you and make you into his son and his daughter and become the creature that he wants you to be in the first place. Don't let anybody take that away from you. Amen? Okay. Let's all be standing for a closing word of prayer. Lord, I just thank you that against all the deception, you have your truth, and you have those scholars, those Christian scholars who are being persecuted and fired because they stand up for an unpopular view, that they are holding the torch on this, that they are fighting the battle for us, so that those of us who are common people can go, oh, the Bible is true. So I thank you for them, and I thank you that this information is available to us. So help us to take the information and let it, be a foundation to our faith, and let us share that foundation with others. Guide us, Father, to be a light in this community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.